Up to your attention. Still have a couple Gaither vocal band tickets if you would like some, or if you know somebody that would like some. I would like to get rid of them and not have some extra ones at the end, but $25, I have a few left, so if you'd like one, just let me know. Also, tomorrow is our spaghetti lunch ministry. If you could be here, those of you that are part of that, be here around 9:30. Okay, 10. Be here sometime between 9:30 and 10. There's 101 plates that we'll be putting out tomorrow, so if you can come and help that. Also, through everything that's gone on in the last month, our water bottles we just have like 24 that showed up tonight, so if you'd like to bring any water bottles, you could do that. We could always use some water bottles for that as well. This Friday night is our Pamlico Association meeting over at Emmanuel Free Will Baptist Church on Highland Drive. If you'd like to go to that, we will have a van that will leave the church about 5:45. What they do is they have some finger food refreshments type thing around 6 o'clock, and then at 7 o'clock is a service, and then we'll come home after that is over. So if you'd like to go, please be over here about 5:45, and we'll drive a van over there together. And if you don't want to go if you just want to go at 7, just meet us over there. But if you've never been to one, it's, come and check it out and see what it's all about. On Saturday, our young adults are having a picnic. That need to see Brother Bobby. If you need any details about that, at 1 o'clock on Saturday. I'm not for sure all the details, so see him. And then Sunday night, there will be a special called business meeting for our election of teachers and officers for the upcoming year. So that will be Sunday night during our Sunday night service there. So be here for that as well. Some prayer requests just to bring to your attention. Also, Brother Daniel asked me to announce also that if you would be interested, he is looking for 2 spots to fill in the Awana program that's starting up next month. And so if you're interested in helping out with the Awana program, there's not an age limit, there's not a whatever. It's just if you would be interested in helping out with Awana, please see Brother Daniel or see Miss Erica after the service tonight, and let them know that you'd be interested in helping out with that. Some prayer requests, unspoken requests. We still have several of those. We have some unsaved family members and loved ones. All of us do. So pray for those. Pray for those who may be sick. I'm not hearing as much coming in about people who may have COVID or not have COVID right now, but I'm sure that somebody probably does. I just found out Monday that one of our senior adults who comes occasionally when their health is allowing them, she told me that last month she had COVID. And I said, well, I never even knew it. She goes, well, I didn't want to bother you with it. So I never knew anything about it, but she did have COVID. It's the first time she'd had it. And so she was kind of concerned, but I never knew anything about it. So I'm going to reiterate, if I don't know anything about it, I can't do anything about it. So, and there's not a whole lot I can do. I told her, I said, I could have come over and brought you something to eat. I could have got you a milkshake. Miss Chris knows about that. And I'd get you a milkshake or do something. And So just let me know and we'll do something, but just I can't help if I don't know. Continue to pray for V. Diaz's mother and sister in Maryland who have different health issues. Don Edwards' friends who have different health issues. Miss Brenda and her health, and she seems to be doing much better. I talked to her the other day, and she is doing somewhat better, but just continue to pray for her that God will allow these things to continue to be on the positive side with that. Miss Lula Stout's nephew, continue to pray for him. Continue to pray for Abby in Japan. If you saw a post from her this morning, she drove a car for the first time in Japan. She has her international driver's license. She was able to drive a car. Now, their steering wheel's on the other side of the car. And she said, I only turned on the windshield wipers twice while I was trying to turn the blinkers on. So she did mess up a little bit of that because they're opposite on everything, but continue to pray for her as she is progressing with her time over there in Japan. Continue to pray for Carol Harris's brother who has cancer. Miss Retta Doggett and her lung issues. Their granddaughter, Emma, she is going through rehab things for her as well. Continue to pray for them. Gene and Retta Doggett's also, they have a friend, Gail Klaus, who has breast cancer, and they've requested prayer for her. Continue to pray for Mr. Johnny and Miss Jean Smith. I was able to go by and talk to Miss Jean the other day, and there's not really a whole lot of progression with Mr. Johnny. It's just the same as it has been, but he has good days and bad days, but just pray for him and pray for her and her stamina and her health, and as she tries to go and visit with him when she can. Also, Mr. Bobby Hollis is waiting on surgery for his knee, so continue to pray for him. Miss Margie McGowan was able to visit with her, and she said, I'm going to start telling people that I'm feeling okay. Because I asked her all the time, I said, how you doing? She goes, well, I'm having a bad day, not feeling too great. And I said, well, you say that every time. She goes, I know, I'm going to stop saying that and just say I'm feeling good. So she's 92, and I told her, I said, now listen, when you're 92, you're supposed to maybe not feel good all the time. And she goes, yeah, but I'm tired of it. And here's betwixt us here. That's a common theme that when I talk to a lot of our older shut-ins, that they really wish that they could do the things that they used to do, and now they're not able to do them things, and so it's depressing when they're not feeling well, when they're not able to do things that they normally could do before. And so there's just a lot of things. And if you could go by and see them, send them a card, give them a phone call, something, that is great encouragement to them when you're able to do those things. Also, Miss Barbara Stocks, pray for her and her health. She had a doctor's appointment yesterday, and so just pray for her as she is trying to heal up with everything that she's been going through as well. Miss Lois Corey, pray for her and her family with this time of loss. We had a funeral this morning for her brother, and so continue to pray for her family as they go through this time of loss, and also Chuck Warren and his family as they went through this loss and the funeral that we had last Saturday. So continue to pray for all these families with the losses that they've had. It's kind of a big change in a lot of ways, and so pray for them. Any other prayer requests that we can add to this list? That's right. Billy Campbell's brother. All right, you have them next Tuesday? Hey. I'm not going to say anything. I won't say anything. You guys all know what I'm thinking. I won't say nothing. Kind of reminds me of the Scarecrow. The Wizard of Oz. That's a great movie. All right. I know I'm evil, but I love Miss Chris. All right. Any other prayer requests? Mr. Bob? We do. It's true. Anything else? All right. Well, let's pray, and we'll ask God to be with these and with our class tonight. God, we thank you so much for what you do for us. God, we thank you for just being a God who's with us all the time, even in the tough times and the hard times. God, as you've been with these families who have gone through some difficult losses in the past week, Lord, I thank you for being with them and just pulling in other people to be able to come in and gather around them and just encourage them. Lord, I pray that we will continue to do that in the days and weeks to come as well, Lord. I pray for our senior adults, God, that just a lot of them are struggling with different things, Lord. Some of it's health issues, some of it's just age issues, and whatever it is, Lord, I just pray that you will give them encouragement, Lord, and uplift them today, Lord. Give them a blessing that can only just come from you, God. Help for us to be blessings and to make phone calls and make visits and go out and see and And so, God, I just pray that you will help for us to be the encouragement to them that we need to be during this time in their lives and the things that's going on with them. God, we had several that we mentioned about different health issues, family members and loved ones and people that we know. Lord, I just pray that you'll be with all of them. God, just touch their bodies, the ones who may be sick that we may not know about right now. Lord, I pray that you'll touch them and heal their bodies as well. God, there's just so many things that are going on and so many things that are happening, Lord, even in our government and our country and the things that are happening there, Lord. God, I pray that you will not let us venture too far away from you, Lord, that you will allow us to turn back to you and as a country. But God, we've got to start somewhere, and we need to start in our homes, in our families, in our church. So God, I pray that we will be that light that needs to be in our dark world that we're living in right now. And so God, help for us to do what we need to do to be the examples to those that don't know you. And so God, we just lift up our country and those in our government positions tonight. God, I also pray for our unspoken requests, Lord, and the ones that we may have, Lord, for the unsaved family members and loved ones that we know of that, God, they need to know you. And so, God, we just pray that we'll be the example for them as well. God, we love you. We thank you for everything that you've done for us. We thank you for the sunshine today. And God, just give us a good evening tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so if we look at our bad joke of the day, here's a question for you. The first one is kind of easy, I think anyway. But what did Adam say to his wife on the 24th day of December? He said, "It's Christmas, Eve." You know, as I got doing that, there's nothing biblical about that. It's just a funny joke. So don't think that there's biblical, because Jesus hadn't even come to be born yet when Adam was there. So, all right. That's what makes it a bad joke. All right. But I had a great joke about COVID, but I didn't want to spread it around. So we'll hold up on that one. All right, everybody needs a good smile every once in a while. There we go. All right. If you can remember back 3 weeks ago when we were still talking about Unprepared and talking about this apologetics, responding to different specific worldviews, we started talking about agnosticism, and then all of a sudden I was gone to the national, and then we had Vacation Bible School last week, and so it's been a couple weeks since we have looked at this, but I want to get back into this and possibly finish looking at this specific one tonight. But I believe that the reason that we see many movies, many shows, songs, books about spiritual matters is because the Bible teaches us that we have eternity written in our hearts. We're always looking at eternity. What is eternity? What's it going to be like? And so people are writing books about it. They're writing movies about it and different things that are happening. It tells us in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11, he said, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end." He's putting eternity in all of our hearts. So people are looking to see what happens next, what's going to happen later, what's going on there. We were created with a longing to know that there is something greater in this universe than us. There's a longing inside of people. Even the people who won't admit it, I think there is a longing there just to know what is out there. Where did all this come from? What's going on here? Agnosticism is a worldview that states that the existence of God cannot be proven or disproven. So basically, they're saying that, yeah, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not, I don't know, and most of them will say, I really don't care. And that's where they're at with that. Agnosticism doesn't deny the existence of God, but then it also does not affirm that God exists. Now, if somebody says, I'm agnostic, I don't believe there is a God. They're not agnostic, they're atheist. So we have to understand, you and I have to understand the difference between atheist and agnostic is, an agnostic say, well, maybe there is a God, I don't know. And atheists will say, no, there isn't a God. So there's a difference there in those two that we need to understand completely of what's going on. I want to go back, it's on a paper that you may have picked up in the back, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, and read verses 18 through 25. It's on your papers there. But it says this, "For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men." So as we look at these verses and we see some things about these verses that we're looking at, we have to understand that unlike atheism, what we talked about a while ago, agnosticism keeps the question of God's existence open-ended. They don't know. And I've mentioned it before, that's a lot of people that I have run across in Bulgaria are very agnostic. They're not necessarily atheists. There probably are some atheists, but a lot of them are agnostic, and they look at it as like, I don't know if there's God. I mean, look at me. I live in this apartment. It's not very big. There's one bedroom and a kitchen and a living room, and that's all we have, and there are 9 people living in it. And it's concrete ceiling and concrete walls, concrete floors. If there is a God, he hasn't done much for me. Look at where I live. Look at my life. Look at what's happened to our country. So they don't know, and they don't understand those things. But agnosticism focuses its attention on the idea that we can neither prove nor disprove the existence of God. They'll say, I don't know if there's a God or not, but you can't really prove it. You could tell me, oh yeah, you believe in God, that's great, but can you prove it? And they think you can't prove any of those things. And so what I want to do, and what we started doing last time, was looking at the scripture and other passages in the Bible about our response and how we as Christians should respond to the agnostic worldview. And that's kind of what we started at looking at a couple weeks ago. And we only got through the first point, but I'm just going to do a quick little thing of that first point. And we looked at considering the existence of God, looking at the existence of God. If there is no God, then we are free to live however we want to. We can do whatever. I mean, there is no God, so why is there rules about anything? Without any concern, we wouldn't have any concern about an eternal consequence, because when I die, what do they say? I'm worm bait now. The end. There's nothing that's going to happen to me now. I die, the end. That's the end of it. There's nothing else there. And so they believe that we can live however we want to because there is no God. But if there is a God, and if God has certain standards for you and I, then there are great implications on whether or not we obey him or whether or not we disobey him. It's sort of like if you have a parent and you choose to obey your parent or choose to disobey your parent. Most households, my household, there were consequences. Sometimes there were rewards, but there were always those things that we had to live by, the standards that we had to live by. The fact that an agnostic cannot be sure whether God exists makes it reasonable for that person to consider Christianity. If they don't believe that there's a God, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not, I don't know. And that gives us an open door to be able to present God to them in a way that they can understand it. An atheist is going to say there is no God. But an agnostic is going to say, well, I don't know. Well, let's have a conversation about this. Let's see what we can find out. One key attribute of humans that points to a divine creator is the presence of certain emotions. And we have gone through this, several people in our church have gone through this in the last week. Several different emotions that's going on. After sin entered the world, there was a separation that occurred, and ever since that separation, death and separation have created emotions such as grief, distress, and sorrow. We have these emotions. We grieve over ones that we have lost. We have this sorrow over ones that have lost. So fundamentally speaking then, emotions like grief are proof that not only is there a God, but we wear the fingerprint of the divine on us as his creation because we grieve. I mean, if they die and they're just, nothing happens to them, they just fade away and go away, nothing there, then there's not a whole lot. I mean, why do we sorrow? We sorrow because we separate, but if there's no separation, see, we have to be able to consider the existence that there is a God, that God is there. We have grief because God allows us to have this grief. We know this separation because we felt it. God felt it when man sinned and there was a separation built between us and him. And so we have that. Tonight what I want to look at is the second point, which is making known what is unknown. So making known what is unknown. Many things in this world are unexplainable in human terms. There's a lot of times you could look at something and you could try to describe it, but you're just not going to be able to get all the words correctly out. And I have some examples. How does a flower really bloom? I mean, if you wanted to get into the deep, what is that long word? See? Yeah, not that one. What is it? I don't know. Photosynthesis. I don't know how long it is, but it's a long word for me. But if you want to get into all those details, into the grasp of it, some people just, they live for that and they love that, but the rest of us are like, what was that long word? And we don't get it. But how does a flower really bloom? I mean, really, when it comes down to it, what makes it? I mean, we could describe photosynthesis and other things, but really, what makes photosynthesis happen? What makes those things happen? How do birds know when to head south for the winter? Last time I learned, birds don't read calendars. So how do they know when? But most importantly, how do they know which way is south? Okay, not only do they have to know when to fly south, but how do they know which direction is south? Have you ever gone out into the middle of the woods and stood there and tried to figure out, okay, now how do I get back out of here? Some of you guys that go out on boats, have you ever been out on a large body of water and you're out on this large body of water and you're thinking, all I see is water. Which way do I go now? Have you ever flown in an airplane and you got up above the clouds? How do they know which? They have instruments and they have things that tell them which direction to go, but birds just take off and fly. How do they know where to go, which direction to go, when to go? All of those things that happen. Fortunately, we have the wisdom of God's word. Scripture affirms for us that creation never stops speaking. It never stops speaking. And if we let creation will always cry out and declare the majesty of God. Creation will cry if we allow it to, if we will pay attention, if we'll stop for just a moment and pause. Creation will cry out and tell us that there is a creator that created them. It's there. In Job chapter 12, interesting thing that goes on here. It says this, starting in verse 7. It said, but ask the beast, and they will teach you. The birds of the heavens, and they will tell you. Or the bushes of the earth, and they will teach you. And the fish of the sea, they will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? He's saying these beasts, these birds, these bushes, these fish, they know who has done what's happened to them. In his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. Does not the ear test words as the palate tastes food? Wisdom is with the aged and understanding in the length of days. So we see in the book of Job, how it's explained it, hey, creation is shouting out and telling us who created them. They're going to give it to us. So the question that I have for you guys, I want you guys to answer this one here. How can a bush of the earth teach you and me about God? How can a bush teach us about God? Don't everybody go at once. I know it's been a couple weeks. Photosynthesis. All right. Right. You see a bush that will kind of, I don't trim my bushes in the wintertime, but I do all summer. How does it know when to slow down and stop growing? See, it's talking to me. Somebody has told it. What? Yeah, I hate the yellow stuff, though. I love spring as well, but pollen I can do without. But people who have gardens, hey, how does these plants out in the garden get pollinated and start giving the things to grow? Because the pollen floats around. And the bees. Do what? Yeah, if it's burning, it's going to start talking to you. If it's not burning up, be careful. Yes. It's looking for the water that it's not getting on the top, so it's going down below to find the water. Yes. Right. But God has given them that daylight, and He's allowing them to know whether or not to pop up and bloom. Bob? I don't have an answer for that, but God does. Now, I'm gonna speak out of my field of knowledge for just a moment. I read something and saw something the other day that you guys may know a whole lot more about, some of you more than others about than I will. But the reason why you grow a lot of corn stalks, corn in the field, you grow a lot of them together and not just like at my house where we had 3 and they didn't do too well, is because there are male and female and they pollinate each other in order for that corn to grow on it. And so the more that you have out there, the more it's able to do that versus only having a few. I didn't know that. I've witnessed that in my own little garden of four corn stalks. And then when I drive out of my neighborhood and there's this big field full of corn, and he's like, man, come on. But I just learned this about even in corn and plant, male and female. And that's what produces the offspring, which is the corn that we'll go out and pick. that kind of, I don't know. I was 51 years old when I learned that. Adrian is here, and he's out there in the back. He could probably teach us a class on that. See, more people know about this than I do. What he just said, I don't know. So I hope you were listening, but yeah, I don't have a clue what he's talking about. But there's male and female plants. Yes. Adrian, do you know anything about that? So there you go. Anybody listening on a live stream, I can't explain any of this. I'm sorry. They're talking about chickens eating seeds and depositing them. I couldn't tell you. But they have to be pollinated in order for them to grow. And see, God has a plan. God created this stuff, and now I'm going to focus back into here somehow. All right? Now, I've just explained what fascinates me, but what processes in nature fascinate you? And how can those processes point to God? I wish you guys could see what I'm saying. There you go. There's a smoke detector up there that for some reason just started going off, and Carmela and V are sitting up there close to it. Hey, just take it down and take the battery out, because maybe the battery's dying. What time is it? 7:30. Time to pray, go home. All right. All right, we'll just skip that question. All right, so what processes in nature fascinate you? And how can they point to God? So the fires in California help the redwoods to grow. Okay. Right. Anybody else? Any processes that fascinate you? In the middle of a cold tundra with no light, and you got a plant that'll pop up. I didn't know that. I went to Free Will Baptist Bible College. It wasn't horse and donkey thing here. Did you know that? He's saying, yeah. Christine didn't know about it either. So, hey, I'm not the only one. All right. Now, I know that you was talking about ice and stuff. I've been out on a lake riding four-wheelers on a frozen lake, but told not to go to that side of the lake because that's where the spring is, and so that does not freeze. I'm on that thick of ice riding around on a four-wheeler on a lake, but over there is still water. And it's 0 degrees outside. So that's kind of crazy stuff right there as well. Why does that not freeze? I know it's because the water's moving and all those things, but still, it's cold and it's water. Right, it's a crazy area. Well, agnostic teaching says that if you cannot see something, hear something, or hold something in a tangible way, then it probably doesn't exist. That is what the teaching says. That's what the theory of, well, I don't know if there's a theory of it, but agnosticism will teach that. If you can't see it, hear it, or hold it, then it probably doesn't exist. But not being able to see or hold something specific does not disprove its existence. If that were the case, then we would not really be able to believe in gravity. We would not be able to reason because you can't see it or hear it or any of those things. You wouldn't be able to have thoughts. I mean, how do I know what you're thinking? How do I even know you're thinking? Most of you probably are not, but how do we know these things if we don't, but it's there. We see these things and we know what's going on. In the book of Acts, we read about a time that the Apostle Paul used the culture of Athens to address profound spiritual truths. And so I want to look at that in Acts chapter 17. It says this. It says, "Now while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him, and some said, 'What does this babbler wish to say?' Others said, 'He seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection.' And they took him and brought him to the how do you say that word? I knew this word before tonight. Areopagus. They brought him to the Areopagus and saying, 'May we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting.'" This Areopagus was an area that they went to sit and talk, to philosophize over. That's not even a word either, is it? To talk about things that were important. And so they would go there, they would discuss these things. And so they took him there to this place and they said, "May we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting. For you bring some strange things to our ears, and we wish to know, therefore, what these things mean." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you, the God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place." Now Paul is there and he's talking to these Athenians and these people here. He goes around and observes what's happening. He's in conversations with different people in different places, and he's talking to them about what's happening and what's going on. He observes. He learns. A lot of times we need to take that in for ourselves, because many times we walk into a place and we just start spreading instead of observing, so that when we talk, we actually are talking intelligently. And so he goes in there and he observes, and he's looking at these things. And then they said, hey, we want to know more about what you're talking about, because this is new to us. He said, hey, I see that you have an idol to the unknown God. You don't know who he is, and so you built an idol to him. Well, I'm going to tell you who he is. And so Paul goes from there, and he starts sharing with them about God and who God is. So why might people build a shrine to an unknown God? Why would people do that? Okay. Just in case they miss somebody, they want to make sure that they got them up there, that they're represented. I see that in Africa. In Africa, when I was there, you go into different villages and they would have different idols for different things. And if they missed something, that they would want, hey, give me something there so I can make a fetish for that as well. For fear. Okay, why else would they might do that? Anything else? Okay. They will pray to Mary, yes. I can't go really in depth into Catholicism either. Some people may know more about that than I would. But they wouldn't necessarily look at that as an idol per se. They look at that more as a statue. This is representing Mary. And so I'm praying to this statue of Mary. I'm not necessarily, in the mind, I'm not necessarily praying to the statue. I'm praying to Mary, is what they would do. Does that make sense any at all? I mean, it's 6 and 1/2 dozen the other. It's, you look at it, hey, they're sitting there praying to an idol versus a statue. Right. It can be for different places because, see, even in, like, I keep going to Bulgaria, but in Bulgaria, the Bulgarian Orthodox, which is very similar to Catholicism, they don't have statues because they say those are idols. So they put pictures up everywhere. And they pray to the pictures. Because a picture is 2-dimensional and a statue is 3-dimensional. And a 3-dimensional is an idol and a 2-dimensional is just something you're praying to. Yes. Right. Right. So do you get that? Mary, these other saint people, saint this, saint this, saint this, they are basically, in the long scheme of things, I'm praying to Saint Christopher, but he is an intercessor to talk to. You say, in Jesus' name, I pray, amen. Because you're praying to Jesus, who is our intercessor to God. The Bible teaches that there is only one intercessor between God and man, and that is the Son, Jesus Christ. So if I'm praying to Mary as an intercessor for me, that's unbiblical because Jesus is the only one that can do this. If I'm praying to a different saint, whatever, they're not intercessors for me. Jesus is the only intercessor. That's biblical. Yes, sir, Mr. Bob. Right. Maybe, I don't know that. Well, Abby shared, right. Abby shared when she was here about the shrine that she went to, the okay, I can't think of how the religion over there, primary religion over there. And there's temples that they would go to, and she talks about, and she was recently there just this past weekend, She took some interns that are there serving right now, and they went and they saw this thing again. She took them. But she talks about how they will write notes and papers and hang them up here. These are prayers that they're trying to get answered. They will go ring a bell to wake up the gods so that the gods will hear them when they're praying. They'll shout, they'll clap loudly to wake. It sort of reminds you of Mount Carmel when Elijah was saying, "Hey, just why don't you yell louder and wake them up because they're not listening to you." But there's a lot of things that happen there, even in Japan today. That's going on, and it's very sad. Abby gets emotional every time because she says, "I want them to know that this doesn't work, that there is a God," and so it's very prevalent even in today's world. How is the Athenian shrine to an unknown God similar to modern day agnostic teaching? How would that be similar to modern day agnostic teaching? Just in case. I don't know if there's a God, or maybe there's a God, maybe there's not, but just in case, we're going to put it out here to the unknown God in case we're missing one. Okay, what evidence does Paul start with when discussing the unknown God, and why is this an important strategy? What evidence? Yes, ma'am. Right. So he's observing and looking, and then when he's talking with them, he said, "Look, I perceive that you're very, very religious people. Because you have all of these statues and you have all of these things that you're praying to, that you're trying to make sure that you've got everything covered. You even got one to the unknown God. So I can see that you're very religious." And that's an important strategy because you don't want to offend someone and go out right off and say, "Hey, you know what? You're not even praying to anything that's real." I mean, sometimes, yes, that's very true, but sometimes we need to go about it in a diplomatic way in order to relate and discuss with them. Yes. Right. Right. So he's using what they're already thinking in order to explain to them and try to give them some insight onto what is this unknown God. When Paul said that God doesn't live in man-made temples and that human hands can't serve his needs, what was Paul declaring about God? Okay, wait a minute. Say that. What did you say, Trav? He is the God. What did you say over here? He's not flesh. He is the God. Do what? Lives in your heart, not in a building. He doesn't depend on us. Yes. Right. He doesn't need these idols. He doesn't serve like these things. He's not like these other ones. He's all powerful. He controls everything. He's the one that created the world. He's the one that gave you breath. Without him, you wouldn't have life, is what Paul was going through. Paul took time to examine the things that the Athenian culture worshiped. And we've kind of talked about this, but why is it important as you consider sharing your faith or asking questions about someone else's worldview? Why is that important? To understand where they're coming from. Right. Right. You know, I met today at a funeral. I didn't know, I've met these people before, but I didn't know any really history about them, but they're Mormon. And they were here today at a funeral. And, you know, I've read a lot about Mormonism. I've been out to Utah to the Mormon Tabernacle. I've been to all those places and seen that stuff. And I've read a lot about the differences between Christianity and Mormonism. But if I was to go to them today and just say, "Yeah, well, you just believe a false thing, man. You're in a cult," that would not go over well with them, I wouldn't assume. I need to befriend them. I need to understand where they're coming from so that I can explain the differences in how they believe. Because I've read about Joseph Smith, and I've read about how he got what he has and where the Book of Mormon came from. I've read all of those things because I went out there. I wanted to understand it. So I could discuss, but I don't want to offend. Yes, did you have? Right. Oh yeah. You can use those things to be able to find that common ground and be able to share with them instead of you would be mad, and you probably get mad. Somebody comes up and says, well, you're silly for believing in God that has created the world. And that would make you mad. And then you would turn off anything else they're going to say after that. Well, the same thing happens on the flip side. You have to be careful how you approach so that you don't turn them off to listening to what you're trying to say. Right. Man, you got me going again here. I'm headed to Bulgaria again next month. I'm excited about that. This will be 12th or 13th trip or something like that, going over to Bulgaria. When I go to Bulgaria, I go to the same city every time. The mayor now, he knows who I am. We've had discussions and talked about things. The people who exchange our money from U.S. dollars to Bulgarian lev, this guy knows me. He knows why we're there. People in the hospital, in the units that we've worked in, people at the School for Disabilities for Children, the School for Disabilities for Adults. We've gone into these places. They know who we are. But Melinda was there that first year that we went. I'm trying to think if anybody else from here that is in here was there that very first year that we went. I can't think of anybody that may be in here right now. But when we went that first year, we were working the front of this school. It was an overgrown jungle-looking area that used to be a park. And we went in there and we had made benches to sit on. We trimmed trees up to where I could walk. I always figure if I can walk under a tree and not hit my head, the limbs are fine. But if I have to duck and go around, then it needs to be trimmed. And so I went around trimming trees up here. And we cut the grass that was this tall. We cut down and we planted new grass, and we did all kinds of stuff in there. Painted playground equipment, doing things. The first day that we're doing this, we had these older people that would walk by on the sidewalk because we're outside in the middle of the public. Everybody driving by and seeing us. They'd walk by and they'd kind of look, and then they'd just keep walking. And then they'd look and they'd just keep walking. But then, a couple days into it, they would come by and walk, and they'd stop and they'd look. And then they'd keep going. By the end of the week, they were walking by like this, and then they'd stop, and then they'd start telling us something. I have no clue what they were saying. We would walk up to the fence, and we would try to talk to them and say stuff, and they would talk in Bulgarian, and we would talk in English, and we were having big old conversation, and nobody knew what was going on. But when we found out, they said the people were happy and excited that somebody had finally done something with this area. That somebody was there. And see, they look at Christianity as being the cult. We are on a list of 20 deadliest sins that you can ever commit as being a Protestant Christian. We're right between rape and murder. True story. I've seen the paper that says that. But we're there, and so what we are doing is in the good deeds that we're trying to do to build relationships, to show them that we do care for them and want better for them. And the progress over the last 12 years that I've been able to see from afar, from going once a week, one week a year, it's been amazing to see the progression there. I mean, the waitresses at restaurants that we go to that will start smiling and actually talking to us before we leave. They start off, they don't care anything about us, but by the end of the week, we have conversations with them. So it's neat to watch the progression, but we have to be able to understand where they're coming from, what's going on in their world, so that we can relate to them and we can share with them. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, Verse 18, it says, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. How will unseen things be made visible to us? How will unseen things? Through faith? How will they be visible to us? The unseen. We can see things in a different light, maybe because of Christianity. Do what? A baby being born. You didn't know the baby. I mean, you could tell something was growing in there, but you don't know the baby till you see the baby. You know, the Bible, Corinthians also talks about one day, you know, we look in a mirror and we can't see it, but one day it'll be made clear. One day when we get to heaven, when we see God, and we're able to see these things, it'll be made, that's why. Okay, that's why you made a giraffe. One day we'll be able to understand those things. We may not be able to understand it now, but one day we will. See, the unknown God must have caused confusion for some people. I don't know who he is, but I want to make sure. It probably scared people too. I want to make sure I've got the right gods here. I don't want something bad to happen to me. I want to be careful with it. They had no idea who the God was. Then there was no way that they would know what that particular God did. If they don't know who he is, they don't know what he does. They can't relate to God. This is the unknown God. I don't know that he died for my sins. I don't know that he created the world. I don't know that he gave existence. I don't know. I just know there's an unknown God and he's scary. Because I don't know. See, Paul focused his audience's attention on something seen to expose what is unseen. He used creation in his talk with them. We have these things, we see these things happen because of what you think is the unknown God I'm proclaiming to you as the living God. And he is the one that created these things, the things that you see, the places that you go, the trees, the grass, the animals, the things that are out there are all there because of this God. The beauty, the majesty, and the grandeur of our world provides a great platform for people to gaze at as they can contemplate the existence of a righteous God. So as you're discussing, if you're talking with someone who happens to be agnostic, and you give them this picture of who God is and what he's created and how you can see it in the bushes that grow and how there's a male and female corn and how there's this and that and there's some seeds that are not going to do anything unless chicken eats it and it comes out the other end. None of these things happen. And so now you've discussed some of these things. They may not change their thought right then, but now as they contemplate and they look and they see these things, it's giving them something else to contemplate and look at. They see the glory of who this God must be. Look at how would this seed know to even do that? I was talking to Jesse, and he was earlier before church, and he's talking about his pumpkin patch. I had no clue of this, but he said you have to plant the pumpkin seeds 20 feet apart because of the runner that comes off of them, and so you can't get them all too close together, so you have to plant them 20 feet apart. God knows what he's doing in all these things, and he's created us to be able to see this stuff and to watch those things grow and to see the pumpkins coming off of it, to see the watermelons that we had last week. All those watermelons, by the way, were from Jesse's garden. And I'm telling you how God was able to supply, because Jesse, he comes to me, he says, hey, this is what I want to do. I said, well, how many watermelons? I don't know. We'll see what God will provide us with. And holy cow, we had more than enough watermelon to not only, let me tell you something here, when I was moving some from the outside to the inside of the gym so that they could be in a cooler environment. I gave some to the neighbors over on the street over there. I gave some to the neighbors over here. I gave one guy that was riding his bike through the parking lot. I asked him if he wanted a watermelon. He said, yeah. Had to get a trash bag, find something that could hold it because he was trying to ride a bike and carry this watermelon. That was fun too. And then 30 minutes later, his sister comes driving over and says, hey, I heard you got some watermelon. Can I have one? I was like, yeah. And I gave her a watermelon. Then we had some people, not to be mentioned, that came by and visited during VBS and would take a pumpkin home. A watermelon home. And so they'd take a watermelon home and we had watermelons. There's one night over here during VBS that I cut open a watermelon and gave to all the workers and we ate watermelon. And then Sunday night, went out and cut a whole bunch of them up, and there you should have seen, you could probably still see seeds out there in the parking lot, but you should have seen all the people sitting out there in the parking lot eating watermelon. I was about to say pumpkin again. Eating watermelons out there. A neighbor from across the road, a new one that just moved in, walked over to see what was going on, and hey, they visit, and her daughter is over in church tonight over in the other gym in the building. And so we see this stuff because we were eating watermelon outside. But not only that, I come in Monday morning and guess what? We had 37 watermelons still. So I loaded them into the back of the van because I didn't want them to just go bad and throw them in the dumpster. I didn't want to waste 37 watermelon. So I went to some of our shut-ins homes. A couple of them weren't home. I just left a pumpkin on the front porch. They probably weren't, or a watermelon on the front porch. And they probably got home and saying, where in the world did this watermelon come from? And so I left watermelon, gave watermelon, and then I was talking to Miss Jean Smith. And Miss Jean was talking about how she had told some of the workers there at the nursing home, thank you for something that they had done for Mr. Johnny. And the lady said, thank you. So we never get thank yous here. She said, we get every complaint that you can ever hear of, but nobody ever comes and tells us thank you. So I thought, I'm going to take them some watermelons. So I went over to the nursing home and took 12 watermelons inside to them at the nursing home. They were so excited and so ecstatic to have watermelons. And the lady there, she said, I've been trying to do something nice for our workers that work, especially the night workers, and do something special for them. And she said, and I was just trying to figure out, what am I going to do this week? And here you just pulled up with watermelons. I said, well, it's God. So we had a little conversation about that. Then I went over to the police department and gave them a bunch of watermelons, and they come out, and Jeannie Woolard's brother, who works for the police department, come out and said, well, I knew there must be something good coming out because it's your church van. And I said, well, there you go. So all these guys were helping me. We gave them a bunch of watermelon. And then I still had some left over, so I went to the fire department over here. And they took two. She said, well, how much are they? I said, no, we're just kidding. You want some? You can have some. She goes, oh, thank you. So she took 2 of them in. Then I went to the sheriff's department, and they gave the last 6 of them to the sheriff's department. Let me tell you, that little blessing that Jesse said, well, I don't know how many God's going to provide, but whatever he can provide, that's what we'll have. There was at least over 100 watermelon, 108, 110, over 100. And those watermelons provided blessings to people all over this community because of what Mr. Jesse was able, hey, whatever we got. Now he's saying, and this is something coming up later, Daniel's going to tell you more about, he's got pumpkins growing 20 feet apart. And we're going to have something happening in October that you guys can be part of as well. So just wait for that. That's coming later. All right, well, because we talked so much tonight, we looked more at this one, we looked at this one, and this is what I will finish on next week. But thank you for talking and discussing, and listen, it's amazing God that we serve. Just the little things, and those details and those things that you see about your amazing God are the things that you need to share with other people. Especially the ones that may be agnostic, that I don't know if there's a God. Well, just look at the bushes and see how when it's in a dry area, how they don't focus on the top, they'll spread those roots down looking for water. And just say, how do the birds even know which direction is south? And then when they're out there and they're looking and they see a flock of geese fly over, they're thinking, how in the world those geese know which way to go? Because you planted something in their head. That's what we have to do. We have to understand who it is that we're talking to so that we can better discuss the God that we serve. All right, let's pray. God, thank you so much for who you are, for what you've done, for this awesome and amazing creation that you've given us that's all around us. God, help for us to be able to use these things in discussions and conversations that we have with family, with coworkers, with neighbors, with people around us, when we talk about who you are, because God, more and more today, there are more and more teenagers, young adults that say there is no God, or they don't know if there's a God.